Now, the tech platforms are successfully pretending that online advertising works, which is great for them financially. They're doing really well, but it's a little bit embarrassing when they actually need to do some advertising themselves. So there's been a return to a more traditional form of marketing, public relations. So, just quickly here, there was a guy called Bernays who invented public relations because, in his words, he needed a nicer way of saying propaganda. Now, maybe he is the inventor of public relations, or maybe we just think that he's the inventor of public relations because he ran a very extensive public relations campaign to make it seem like he was the inventor of public relations. Either way, a pretty influential guy. He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he took a lot of his inspiration from Freud's ideas of the subconscious. You know, that we're all like irrational beings that must be controlled. So public relations is all about controlling the masses through secret messaging. Mostly it involves sending press releases to journalists. And ever since PR was invented, it has made up about 40% of all news. At least until recently. As the tech industry crippled journalism, now it's about 80%. But I guess Bernays sort of famously did the campaign to get women smoking Lucky Strike. There were two problems with that. The packaging was a really ugly green and women weren't smoking. So first he goes to a doctor and he goes, what are the health benefits of cigarettes? And the doctor goes, look, it's 1928 and I'm a fucking idiot, so I don't know, it makes you thinner because if you just smoke instead of eating. And Bernays goes, fantastic, can I get that in writing? So then he starts promoting the ideal of thinness to women and promotes cigarettes as something that will help you with that. And rather than change the color of the packaging, he persuaded a bunch of designers and trendsetters and charities to make that shade of green cool. But his big one was inspired by the psychoanalytic idea that women would want cigarettes in their mouth because of, you know, Freud. The idea being it's actually like an empowerment thing. Like, I reject your penis, and so he paid off activists and models to do a protest march smoking cigarettes. And then he took a bunch of pictures of that, published a bunch of articles about it, calling them torches of freedom and making it out to be this sort of grassroots activism sort of thing. And that's what's come to be known as astroturfing. Right? Astroturfing because it looks like it's grassroots, but it's fake. That's not my wordplay, that's a sociologist's idea of a joke. And recently, astroturfing and sock puppet have become sort of buzzwords for American journalists complaining about social media. In the face of Trump and Brexit and the reaction to Star Wars: The Last Jedi, the journalists couldn't believe that the people had done this. So they came up with elaborate theories that the people had not done this. It was Facebook's feedback loops. It was Cambridge Analytica running a mind control campaign. It was Russian bots tricking people and changing the worldviews of millions. My favorite Twitter account of all time was a Russian bot. It got banned in 2016, but it would exclusively post this one picture of an older woman, links to articles about Trump, and misspellings of Harrison Ford's name. It was incredible. That was genuinely all it did. It had like 5 followers. Just really the best I've ever seen. But it's not the sort of thing that's going to change election outcomes. I think bots are very exciting. It's an exciting idea that we could be being manipulated by machines, but it's really not the most effective approach. The fact that it's even being tried at scale is evidence of a much larger problem of manipulation. But there isn't really a case for these bots drastically changing anything at all. Now, one of the descendants of Edward Bernays is a man called Mark Randolph, the founder of Netflix. The first DVD mail order service. Instead of going to an actual place to get your DVDs, you could just order them from your computer. And then of course you'd have to go out to post them back. And anyway, it's not a very good idea for a business. But they were able to beat out the video stores because they were willing to take on unfathomable losses. Now, before they launched, Mark Randolph hired Corey Bridges to do what they called Black Ops. He would infiltrate DVD forums, ingratiate himself with the community over the course of months, and then go, hey guys, have you heard of this new service called Netflix? I love this new service called Netflix. And that's how Netflix got their first 1,000 subscribers, by lying to people. And this was insanely effective. The effective thing about it wasn't convincing individual people to buy Netflix, it was using the communication power of the internet to exploit network effect. You convince a few people to do your marketing for you, and then they convince a few people to do your and so on and so on. So now that's really the goal for anyone trying to sell anything, is to have some sort of organic campaign or transmedia narrative, something that's going to encourage discussion of your product online and transform your fans or your audience into brand ambassadors, or as they're more commonly known, stans. The stan accounts are interesting because they will openly engage in the manipulation of social media, proudly falsifying social movements, inflating streaming numbers, manipulating algorithms to promote stuff they like. I found that basically every time Taylor Swift has entered the trending topics over the past few years, it's been the result of an orchestrated attack on the trending algorithm organized by Taylor Swift stans. The Twitter trending algorithm looks at relative tweet volume. So if something's been tweeted once before and then it suddenly gets tweeted 100 times, that's looking pretty impressive to Twitter. So it's not actually too hard to force something into the trends, you just need to organize for everyone to tweet something at a certain time. So it's grassroots astroturfing. Now, one stan account of particular interest to me is Nas Mirage. He was a Nicki Minaj fan account and a TweetDecker, which was basically a thing where people would dig up old viral tweets and repost them verbatim, and then use the platform TweetDeck to immediately give those tweets a lot of likes and stuff. And then the Twitter algorithm would see that these tweets were getting absolutely incredible engagement, and it would force them into everyone's feed. Now, he was trying to turn this into a career when cowboy memes started to become a thing. So he quickly whipped up this meme song called Old Town Road and used his network to push this across all social media. But through this aggressive push, he was able to develop it into a bona fide TikTok meme. And then through some chart manipulation and continual re-releases, it became an actual hit. And I'm not saying that's bad or anything. I mean, I think there's something quite genuinely aspirational that one person just working day in, day out to manipulate social media could actually have that big of an effect. The interesting thing about Lil Nas X is the second he got an actual PR team, they spent years successfully sweeping this social media manipulation under the rug, even though most of it is still online and viewable, and thousands of people just saw it happen in real time. People have talked about Netflix manipulating social media for years. And sure, it's weird that on the 6th of October 2014, Netflix and chill suddenly changed meaning entirely, with no inciting meme or popular post behind it. Just everyone collectively decided to start using that phrase in a new way. And people noticed that viral posts about Netflix releases largely come from accounts with like no followers. So people theorized that they were bots or sock puppets, but then some journalists got in touch with some of these accounts and found out that no, they were real people. And ever since then, that has been a trend that we see with the Netflix releases and the Disney releases, at least. A lot of small, brand new accounts with viral tweets. It doesn't apply to anything else, really just Netflix and Disney releases. Euphoria also had it. But other than that, you never really see that. But we can't know who is doing this, or how, or why. When it comes to political marketing, there is a big panic around social media manipulation. It's a popular field of study, but when you look at social media manipulation used for marketing purposes, there really isn't research around that. So let's just blindly take a look here. Let's talk about Bird Box for no reason. Remember that? Bird Box? It's the most successful movie of all time? No? Okay. The Bird Box ad campaign began with a lot of physical marketing. Billboards, posters, installations, a traveling escape room, a theatrical pre-release. But that's really all they need to do. They don't really need to spend on like online advertising because it's useless, and their fans will do their online advertising for them. The only demographic they did spend on was boomer Facebook. Obviously that's the only demographic still falling for that shit. But they did spend on influencer marketing. They paid some Twitch channels to do the Bird Box challenge, which is where you play a game blindfolded. They worked with popular influencer Burbs rights activists to make some tweets and videos, and they bought a hash flag, which is that little emoji that pops up beside the hashtag. When those came out, they were $1 million a piece, but now they get bundled in with every $400,000 quarterly ad spend. Anyway, the point is, it's a big marketing campaign, a broad, expensive marketing campaign, but a lot of that money going in sort of weird direction. Then the movie's released and it immediately starts trending on Twitter, and does so for several days, but with different keywords, regularly cycling out every like 4 to 6 hours. Hashtag Birdbox, Bird Space Box, hashtag Birdbox Netflix, Bird Box space Netflix. Which is interesting, right? Because the trending topics are looking at relative tweet volume. So generally it's not too hard for something to get into the trends, but to keep it there is a much bigger problem. The easiest way to do it would be if you could somehow convince everyone tweeting about a topic to change what keyword they're using about every 6 hours. Particularly egregious is when hashtag BurbBox starts trending. For seemingly no reason. No one was tweeting it, and now that it's trending, the only people using it are using it to say, why is this trending? It's a spelling error. Now, of course, Netflix had used that hashtag before Bird Box came out for their collaboration with Burbs rights activists, but now, a week later, with like 40 tweets from all time ever using that hashtag, suddenly it's trending. Now, there's a weird quirk in the trending algorithm. It counts the tweets as they come in. So if you tweet something and then 1 millisecond later you delete it, that will get counted. So you can use a botnet or compromised accounts to just really quickly tweet and delete this one phrase over and over, and it'll pop up into the trending topic. And that is a type of attack that is done twice an hour, every hour of every day. Coincidentally, in the few minutes before BurbBox starts trending, we see tens of thousands of tweets being made and deleted. But there's nowhere to say who is doing the social media manipulation, or how they're doing it, or why they're doing it. Who would have the motivation to promote a Netflix show using underhanded but broadly untraceable means? We just can't say. Now, we're not talking about Bird Box because it's a randomly chosen good example. We're actually talking about it because when Bird Box came out, I'd noticed there was some weird stuff happening, and I was running data analysis on those tweets. But what I found at the time was that small accounts who were tweeting about Bird Box were having their likes inflated. The recommendation algorithm takes into account how many likes you're getting versus your account average. So if you're a 10 follower account getting 0 to 1 likes per post, a targeted attack to give you 13 likes will disproportionately push that post into people's feeds. So just with a few likes, you can have an outsized effect on what is getting shoved into people's faces. And I found that these likes were coming from the same few people, operating in little networks of like 20, multiple accounts that are all the same person, just like the TweetDeckers. Now, I had just been doing that data analysis recreationally, but now that I'm sharing it somewhere, I thought it would be good to check in with those accounts. 6 years later, ask them, what was all that liking Netflix tweets about? But the interesting thing is, they're all suspended now. Absolutely every single one of them, obviously. Which you can see. A lot of the viral tweets about Bird Box are just gone now, and the ones that are still up have lost a lot of their likes. But there's nothing concrete here. We can't know who did this or how or why. Maybe that's just what organic engagement looks like on Netflix shows. Now, as we reach the end of this first week, Netflix comes out and says that 45 million accounts watched at least 75% of Bird Box in its first 7 days. People pointed out that if you converted that to box office, that would be in the top 5 openings of that year, sort of the equivalent of the Star Wars movie that came out that year, easily beating out Captain Marvel or Joker, and the franchises like Mission Impossible and Fast and Furious. It would have outperformed A Quiet Place by at least 5 to 1, which seems very legitimate given its cultural staying power. But there's no way of saying for sure. It may be possible. There wasn't really any good third-party tracking at the time. But now we do have pretty good third-party tracking. So we can look at something like Army of the Dead, which Netflix says was watched by 75 million accounts in its first 4 weeks. But using the numbers from an independent tracker like Nielsen would show that the figures seem to be around 36 million. I think a good little check to do whenever Netflix releases a number is ask, have they just doubled it? So at the very least, they've found a creative way of counting. But whenever they release these numbers, it creates a big news story. It creates the movie's success. The biggest day for Bird Box on Twitter, Reddit, Google Trends, IMDb, Metacritic, and Letterboxd was the day after they released those figures. They told people it was successful, and then it became successful. Now, another week passes, and they put out a tweet warning people not to do the Bird Box challenge. Again, big news story, big day for Bird Box in the trends, but no one had actually been doing the Bird Box challenge. There were a couple of videos with like 10 views and their own promotion that they had paid for. But of course, as soon as they say not to do it, Logan Paul's out there running over pedestrians blindfolded, and it's a big news story, but it didn't exist before then. Now, I don't have any answers, I don't have the questions, there's no way of knowing who could want to promote a Netflix show. And this maybe does paint quite a bleak picture, that you could manipulate the masses from the shadow, just with targeted attacks on social media. But what's happening here isn't really manipulating the masses, it's manipulating the social media algorithm. Beyond the lack of transparency, it doesn't seem to be all that different from like a billboard ad campaign. Someone who's not interested in seeing a shitty streaming horror movie is not going to be swayed by a large volume of internet strangers' tweets. But maybe it's so pervasive that it makes its way to someone who is interested in seeing a shitty streaming horror movie, and now that they're aware of it, they give it a go, and they may be emboldened to post about it because it seems to be the thing to do. Maybe they get their friends to watch it, and it can start to have a bit of a snowballing effect, just like the influencer marketing. So in terms of getting eyes on something, this seems to be just as effective as regular advertising. But no one liked Bird Box. Most of the tweets about Bird Box were about how much it sucked. In a world where targeted advertising doesn't work, it makes sense that you might resort to other methods. But that's kind of it. And you can see this sort of thing happen all the time, not just for things that are successful. You can see it happen on the day that Tiger King came out. And that's interesting, because Tiger King was successful, but it wasn't successful until a few weeks in. So yeah, the technology is there for Russian bots to make you see tweets about Donald Trump, but that doesn't really change anyone's beliefs. Cambridge Analytica were doing campaigns to make people feel like voting less, which is a very scary idea, but their own metrics show that they were entirely unsuccessful. You can force people to see stuff, but you can't make them like it. Recently in psychology, it turns out a lot of the foundational studies into the subconscious and priming, the idea that you could change the way that someone acts just by using little triggers of words and symbols, those studies can't be replicated. Obviously, it's possible to manipulate people by engaging with them, but the fundamentals of this mass-scale Bernays style manipulation doesn't seem to be based in reality at all. The fundamentals of advertising still work. Putting something in front of people over and over makes them think of that thing more often than if you hadn't done that. But beyond that, it's a grey area. When Edward Bernays hired these activists to smoke, it seemed to have an effect. Now, he thought that this was because of the subconscious associations with oral fixation, that women everywhere were being sort of secretly manipulated into smoking. But his campaign to promote the ideal of thinness didn't seem to do anything at all. And despite making that shade of green cool, Lucky Strike changed the color of their packaging not long after. You know, maybe the torches of freedom appealed to people who already liked smoking and women's rights. He wasn't luring people in with their subconscious desire for empowerment and penises. He was unknowingly taking the existing women's cigarette fan base and converting them into brand ambassadors who went on to do his marketing for him. So yes, there is manipulation, but it's not really algorithms manipulating us. It's machines manipulating machines, and we seem to be stronger than we think.